Using your tax return to buy a home as a self-employed person is one of the worst strategies that you can follow, and most people, they don't even realize it. Everyone's out here telling you to wait another year or two, clean up your tax return, show more income, and hope the lender approves it. But there are better, faster, smarter ways to get qualified. If you focus only on your tax return, you might waste an entire year trying to qualify when the right strategy, it could have got you approved months ago. One of my recent clients, Mark, actually started his home purchase journey with another lender, with the actual bank that he had all his business accounts with, since he was self-employed, business checking, savings, 401k. Started the process actually with them. And when he did, they reviewed his tax returns and said, hey, unfortunately, you're just not going to qualify unless we take some time and we really strengthen these tax returns because you write off too much stuff. Believe it or not, he actually spent a couple of years with them way before he met us. And he worked with his CPA, and for a couple of years, he actually didn't write off all that much stuff, paid a ton of money in federal tax debt. He really didn't have to because he had expenses. He just didn't take them because he wanted to position himself to qualify for a mortgage. So fast forward, it was towards the end of the year, and he found a house. He thought he qualified, which at the time he did. You see where this is going. He went into contract and he's going through the process. It goes into the following year and he's about ready to close. And what happens? They say, hey, listen, it's now, in the spring, whatever the season was, did you file your returns for the most recent year? Because it wasn't those first 2 years that he positioned to help him qualify. He didn't have to file another year, subsequent year's returns. Turns out it kind of bled into the following year and he had to file the previous year's returns, but it didn't come up. So he thought it was like, no big deal. No one will ask any questions. So his accountant got all his stuff, right? His revenue, his expenses, and teed up a tax return, and they ended up filing it. Didn't think anything of it. What's the big deal? You already have the 2 years that you're using to qualify. But it turns out the lender did what's called a 4506 process. It's a tax transfer. What they do is they actually pull that year's returns from the IRS, and if you didn't file, what comes back? No record found. Of course, he didn't file, but it turns out he did file. So the way he filed actually took the expenses that he wasn't taking the previous 2 years, and while he did qualify, now, based on that new net profit, it looks like he went from, call it $300,000 a year of profit, it went down to $60,000 a year. So they went off of that $60,000, that $5,000 a month number, versus the $25,000 a month number, and he instantly got declined, which was probably one of the worst feelings of his life. Well, the good news is the real estate agent that he was working with, we've worked with them in the past. He was actually referred to us, and I said, hey, listen, I know it's frustrating, and that lender was probably giving you a sweetheart of an interest rate, but we have these cool new programs that are based off of your bank statements or your profit and loss instead of your tax returns. He said, oh my God, why didn't I know this? How long have they been around? I'm like, well, they've been around since 2019, 2020, I believe. He's like, oh my God, I wasted years not buying a house when I could have got it at a better interest rate, blah, blah, blah. That's water under the bridge. So what we did was we had to kind of like here and now save the day. We're able to get the last 12 months of his business bank statements. He was making a ton of revenue. So we used that revenue to qualify. And then whatever he did on his tax returns doesn't matter because those programs don't require tax returns to qualify. But as you can see, tax returns when you're self-employed should be the least of your worries. As a matter of fact, when you're self-employed and think of buying a house, you have to understand and at least know what's out there in the market so you don't have to show your tax returns and you can keep writing off all those expenses. All right, so I'm going to show you guys now the tax return trap. If you're self-employed looking to buy a house or refinance, what's the trap with your tax returns? What does it look like? And then I'm going to offer 2 alternative options to help you either buy a house or refinance. That'll be way more streamlined and easier than the whole tax return trap. All right, before I get into it, guys, make sure you go in the description, click the link, download our Ultimate Self-Employed Home Buyer's Guide. It's a complete overview guide. If you're self-employed looking to buy a house, even helps a little bit on refinances. I'm about to get into it all, but it gives you a complete overview. So as I do all this stuff in front of you guys, as you follow along, make sure you download our Self-Employed Home Buyer's Guide and you follow along. All right, so our tax return trap. So when you think of tax returns, whether it's Schedule C, 1120s, 1120S, right? Are you a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC? Are you a sole proprietor? You think, oh my God, in the last 12 months for my tax return, call it the year 2025, I made $1 million for, in the year in revenue. So self-employed clients all the time make the huge mistake. They think their revenue is how much they make. Unfortunately, as it relates to mortgages, it's not. And in the case of, the client that for 2 years was positioning himself well from an expense perspective, then got crushed just because they didn't think anything could go wrong and they filed their returns, right? There are some magical things called expenses. So that $1 million gets whittled down to whatever this net profit amount is. This is what you show the IRS. And this is what you pay taxes off of, both to the Fed side and the state side. So there are, tons of expenses that are allowed to be written off, that are viable, and it just lowers your taxable, amount. lowers your taxable profit, your taxable income, if you want to call it that. So the $1 million in the first 2 years, if you remember, he wrote off approximately $700,000 in expenses. Now, a lot of businesses, just because there's revenue coming in, doesn't mean there's not a lot of expenses going out the door to get that amount of revenue, which then equals your net profit. So if you remember, in year number 1, he made about $300,000 profit. Year number 2, $300,000 profit. So when you averaged it, he thought he positioned himself like a genius for $25,000 a month of income. But unfortunately, in the year, if you want to call it year 3, the one he didn't think that they would see, it went down to $60,000, which is now $5,000 a month. So unfortunately, lenders go very sideways when you're self-employed and your year-over-year net profit goes down. And this went down a ton. I mean, it went down 80% year-over-year. It went down. So it just caused a big problem, and he was basically insta-declined. So to avoid this tax return trap where you have to position yourself with less expenses, more in IRS tax debt, which no one wants to do, right? You have to pay more in taxes. The 2 quick and easy strategies are, and we're going to pick one of the 2 depending on your circumstance, is either doing a bank statement program if you're self-employed or a profit and loss program. Now, what's the difference? Basically, bank statements, we're going to look at the last 12 months of your bank statements. We're going to look at the last 12 months, and we're going to use the incoming revenue as the factor that we're going to try to use and base it off of that for income. And it's not going to be like tax returns, right? We're not going to look at the tax return itself. We're not going to look at the expenses. We're not going to look at the net profit off of return. We're just going to look at the bank statements themselves. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is a profit and loss program. So this is going to be basically over a 12-month period. For instance, if this is December in 2025, it would be based off of December of 2024 to the end of November of 2025. So profit and loss is cool. We're going to go over in a little bit. It shows the revenue. It shows the expenses. It shows the net profit. It's just that simple. The expenses oftentimes are itemized ever so slightly, but this is something where you don't have to wait for the return to be filed. It can be done at any point of the year, and there's a lot of benefits here. But first line of defense is always a bank statement program. Typically has the best interest rate. So a bank statement program is, we're going to get the last 12 months. Now every single month, there's going to be incoming revenue. So in the case over here, right, he had to write off $700,000 only to position himself to make $25,000 a month, and unfortunately took the expenses that they're allowed, and that positioned himself to make $5,000 a month. But this business, from a revenue perspective, made over $80,000 a month, right? So as an example, every month, if this was 90, if you're thinking revenue incoming to the business bank statement, 90,000 this month, maybe 70,000 this month, maybe 80,000 this month, 85, 75. I mean, you see the trend, right? So if you go out throughout the year, you add all together, give or take, like I said, it's about $1 million. So $1 million for the year. That's for the revenue. Now, how do you calculate income? The first thing you do is, what percent does our home buyer own of the business, right? In the case of this specific person, it was 100%. So that's the first thing. Of that $1 million, how much of it is technically like theirs to, claim credit for? So if they're 100% owner, you get 100% face value. If they're 50% owner, obviously, you get half of that. So $500,000 is the starting number. But for this person, it's $100,000. So let's say the average deposits right here are $80,000 a month. The next thing you do is, the first, without even having to do anything, that person will get credit for half of that. A 50% expense factor is what they use. Half of that for income. Now, typically, this is more than enough to qualify. So this $40,000 a month, as you can see, he had to, if you think about it, right, IRS tax debt, $300,000, he's probably paying 60, maybe more than that, to the Fed IRS side and the state IRS side, just because he didn't get to write off his expenses, and taxable income of $300,000, you pay a lot in taxes. Naturally, it makes sense. W-2 employees that make $300,000 are paying, sometimes $60,000 to $120,000 in taxes. So he had to pay years, not even a year, years with an S, of this amount of money or more just to qualify, only to be basically declined. But over here, they give you the way that they calculate income, and again, it's he or she who has the money makes the rules. The way they calculate income for these programs are they take the monthly deposits, which you said are about $80,000 a month, and then they give you credit for half of that, assuming you own the business at 100%. So $40,000 a month with no tax returns, no expense conversations about what you're writing off and what you owe the IRS and all that good stuff. It's just a cleaner, easier way to review taxes. Now, in the case of him, he waited almost 3 years from initial conversation to trying to buy, where he could have purchased right away. And we would have went off of, assuming that the revenue number that we're going off was around these numbers, this is what he would have gotten credit for. So even though he had to position himself, pay all this money to the government and to the state for tax debt, and only get credit for $25,000 a month, he would have got credit for $40,000 for qualifying, and he could have kept his tax returns as is, not worrying about taking less expenses and all that stuff. So the bank statement program is super powerful. What's the catch? Sometimes there's a couple teeny restrictions versus if he did a standard conventional mortgage. First restriction is down payment. Some states allow less than 20% down, the good old state of New York. Typically, 15% down is the minimum. The rate is so kind of spicy, I call it a 15% down. It really just makes sense to put 20% down. When you do a conventional mortgage, you can get away with 3.5% down if you do an FHA loan. VA loans are no money down. If you're a veteran, a conventional loan could be 3-5% down. So the down payment might be a little bit higher. If you use this program, that's one thing to look out for. Number 2, credit score. Credit score typically has to be a little bit higher than a conventional loan. Fannie just removed, Fannie Freddie, they just removed the credit score requirements from a 620. Allegedly in the market, there are conventional mortgage clients with a 580 credit score getting approvals. Hasn't happened with me yet. I'm not sure it will happen, but typically that type of FICO band does an FHA loan. But allegedly it does exist. On the non-QM side, they're going to really want the first number to be 6. And have I seen a 620 credit score get away with it? Not really. If you're looking for 20-25% down, 660, 680 and above. Credit score definitely plays a huge part in these, because if you think about it, it's like, hey, we're not looking at your tax returns. We clearly want you to have a super good credit score. Typically, a good credit score is considered a 740 or above. Just the opportunity of getting a 660 or 680 is a huge advantage. But it is a thing to kind of have a conversation quickly. Credit score, it's a thing for a bank statement program. At least 660 or 680 is something to look out for. And of course, the third thing, finally, is reserves. Now, you can actually buy a one-family home for $1 million, put 20% down, and have a penny to your name after you close, and you can get a conventional loan. I'm not saying that actually makes sense, but it is actually doable. In the case of a non-QM bank statement program, they're going to want to see reserves. In other words, if your mortgage payment is $8,000 a month, they're going to want to see 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months of that in the bank. They're not going to do anything to it. It's your money. But they want to see if something happens, if the you-know-what hits the fan, proverbially speaking, that you can afford making the mortgage payment. So that could be, what, $24,000, $48,000, almost $100,000. But many times, depending on the lender you're working with, sometimes the better price lenders in the bank statement space require more reserves for peace of mind to give you a better interest rate, believe it or not. So reserves are a thing. So if you're self-employed, in the tax return side, obviously you're over it. Always drama, which is the whole point of this video. The bank statement side, say you have 20% down, say you have good credit, just make sure that you're buying and you have enough money for down payment, closing costs, and a handful of months reserves left over. All right, so now the P&L side as a second option. So why would you ever do a profit and loss program and go off of a P&L from a document perspective if you're self-employed? You don't want to do tax returns if you do bank statements, because there are instances where if you're self-employed, where you're a seasonal business, where it's very cyclical. So let's just say, as an example, somebody does things around the holidays. They have a self-employed business, they do pictures, or they sell things around the holidays, and November, December they do very well, and maybe around Easter-ish, March, April they do very well. Maybe do a little bit of Mother's Day, a little bit of Father's Day, but the other 6, 7-ish months, they don't do any business. Basically, net effect closed down. So if you do a bank statement program, well, you think, oh my God, bank statements are such an aggressive form of showing your income, where you don't have to show tax returns. How could that go wrong? If an underwriter sees inconsistent revenue month over month, where it's like, hey, you made $200,000 in a month in revenue, and the next 2 months you made 0, then you made $100,000, then $100,000, and the next month 0. After that again, they might decline you based on income volatility, where it's not stable. So that's why a profit and loss program would make sense. They're not going to ask for any bank statements. So they're just going to say, as over here, they're going to say, what was your revenue over the last 12 months? So say this business, for this client, $1 million in revenue, say it was a cyclical business where some of the months they kill it and it all adds up to $1 million after a year, but some months they made 0. They're going to show $1 million in revenue, and guess what? The underwriter will never see the bank statements to see the inconsistency of the deposits. It's just like in the last 12 months, what did you make in revenue? What were your expenses? What was your profit? So say over the last 12 months, the expenses were $600,000, right? So that nets out to $400,000. And that's exactly what we're going to use as income. Again, same with profit and loss. Similar to bank statements, they're going to say what percent do they own of the business. Let's say 100% owner of the business. So that revenue, here are your expenses, here's your profit. That's all that they're going to go off of for the income. So these are the two kind of quick and easy programs where instead of following suit to all the tax return madness, these are the two options that we've kind of gone over that will make more sense. So a lot of people say, hey, listen, I'm willing to file my tax returns and show a high, if you remember over here, a high profit. I'm willing to pay more in taxes to get a better interest rate. So I'm going to give you a case in point example, as in the case of this client, of why it doesn't make any sense. So let's say over here, on a $750,000 sale price, for 20% down, what is it, guys? For the math guys in the room, it's 150, right? So a $600,000 loan is if you put 20% down, which is 150. A lot of squiggling here, I get it. So say the going interest rate on a tax return program is 6%. Say the going interest rate on a bank statement program is 6.5%. Now there's these things, these magical things called loan discount points. Loan discount points are if you pay 1% of the loan as a fee, so 1% of 600,000 is 6,000, you get a quarter better in rate typically. So a quarter better would get you to 6.25, so you would need to pay 2 points to get down to 6%. So $6,000 times 2, 600,000 times 2% is 12,000. So here's the case in point. It's literally this simple. If in your head and you're self-employed and you're like, I don't believe you, Andrew, I'm going to do this tax return craze to get the same interest rate, and this is assuming the rates, there's a little bit of a margin. Now the bank statement programs are getting very close to a conventional mortgage from a rate perspective. But say there's a 0.5% margin, which is still somewhat high. If you paid $12,000 in additional closing costs, you would get the same rate that you would on the tax return side. And you say, hey Andrew, why would I ever pay $12,000 more? Because the amount of money that you would have to show to qualify, you might end up having to pay, right? What was it? $60,000 for IRS tax debt, maybe over 2 years, $120,000. So would you rather pay, if you had to choose, the better of two evils, $12,000 or $60,000 to $120,000? I mean, you're 5 to 10xing from a savings perspective, right? So it just shows if you're caught up on rate, you can get the exact same rate that you could on a conventional loan, save all that tax debt that you really never had to pay because you had write-offs, you just didn't take them, just by opting to do a bank statement program and to write off what you're actually allowed to write off. All right, guys, now these were only two of the options for non-QM for being self-employed and not using the tax return route. But make sure you go in the description, click the link, download our ultimate self-employed buyer's guide. It's gonna go over all the self-employed options. There's a bunch more. There's 1099 programs, there's asset-based. So make sure you go in the description, click the link, download our free guide, because a lot of this stuff, I'm not saying it reads like it's Greek to you if you don't speak Greek or read and write Greek at least. But I do this for a living. I've worked with thousands of clients that utilize these mortgages for you. Maybe it's peaking your interest, or you're self-employed and you went through the ringer, the last purchase with issuing your tax returns to the lender, and there was so much paperwork it just never ended and you never want to do it again. So make sure you go in the description, click the link, download our free guide. It's going to help you out immensely. So now that you know what not to do, which is play the tax return game if you're self-employed trying to buy a house, our next video, guys, make sure you watch our next video. 3 months, right? How to buy a house in 3 months when you're self-employed. We're going to give you all the tips, strategies on how to buy your next house in 3 months or less. So watch our next video. Self-employed, I want to buy a house in 3 months.